in this video I'm installing a set of 2006 WRX 2-pot brakes to the rear of my 2005 Forester XT. I've decided to go with the Kartboy adapter kit to make this possible. You will need an 8mm Allen wrench or Allen socket to do your install on this. So let's get started. The first thing you want to do is locate the correct screws. We want to use the long ones to attach the bracket to the caliper. You'll notice that the bracket is indented in the back. I use a little Loctite glue on these screws because I just don't want anything coming out later on or rattling loose. Always hand thread all my screws to get them started. You don't want to cross thread these. These rear calipers are made out of aluminum alloy, so you have to be really careful when you're putting this together so you don't cross thread one of the screws. If you'll always use finger tie them and get them started, you'll be a lot better off and you should never have any problems. If you do have a problem, stop what you're doing, pull the screw out and see what's holding it off. On this particular one, there is a spring clamp on one of the pads, and so I had to push that down to get this in. You could probably pop that off if you didn't want it on there. It doesn't really serve any function in this install, but it came on the pads. And since these calipers came pre-loaded with pads, I'm just using the pads that came with it from Centric. It does take some fiddling around. Sorry, I'm off camera. Just hand tighten them initially. Run your screws down. And then I'll tighten these using a socket. You do want to make sure you use the longer screw, not the short ones. If you use the short ones, you'll just have to do this all over again when you get down under the car, because these long ones will run into the back of your rotor. We got that one done. Now let's do the other one. Once again, just made up the holes. It'd be really impossible to get these things on wrong. I guess if you really worked at it, you could. But I really don't know how. This is probably the easiest part of the whole install. I used blue Loctite. I might want to take these off someday. I know they make a red Loctite. Once it's in there, it's really hard to break loose. This kit is really well made. Kartboy really did their homework on this one. And it's almost all together. Takes about a 1/16 of an eighth of a turn. You want them tight, but you don't want to break anything. And that's it. Now we move on to the car. Okay, the Subaru is jacked up. I have it on jack stands, so it's safe, and it's safe to get under. What we're going to do is we're going to remove the old caliper. It's a 2-part caliper. And then we're going to bend back the dust shields. The dust shields need to be bent back because the new rotors are taller than the old ones. So we're going to take a 14mm wrench. You can use a socket, or you could use an open end wrench. I'm going to use a box end wrench. Whatever you have, they'll break those loose. And we're going to get this part off. It's easier to leave your brake line attached to this. I'll show you a little trick on that. And once we get it off, if you have a piece of copper wire or some kind of a wire coat hanger or something, you work this loose, pull it up, and I'm going to hang this from the coil spring just to get it up out of the way and to protect that brake line. We don't want to break our brake line. We don't have to replace those while we're at this. Once you get that up out of the way, it's time to remove the other part. You can leave the pads in place. I left mine in. I didn't pull them out. You reach around the back and you can see the bolts that you need to remove. You may need to use a socket to get these, and you may just need a bigger wrench to break them loose if you haven't been in there before. Mine have been off before, so they're not that hard to break loose. If you're doing this, you're probably going to be on the ground looking back up at it rather than trying to reach over from the front like I am. So I might go a little faster for you. Here's a closer look at what you're trying to remove. Okay, now we're going to remove the old rotor. There are two 8mm bolt holes or screw holes in all of these rotors, and it's to help you pull the old rotor off of the car. Now, the first thing you want to do is make sure your parking brake is off. Because if your parking brake's on while you're trying to do this, you can wrench a long time and you're going to be pulling against your friction brakes on the inside. So make sure that's off, and then insert your screws and just screw them in, and it'll alternating back and forth. It's going to pop this thing off. If you have trouble getting your screws in, you might want to squirt some WD-40 or a lube in there, even some oil or something, because brake dust and other crud builds up in those holes, and it can make it hard to just pop off like that. Now that's off, and we're ready to proceed. Okay, the rotor is off. I'm going to inspect the parking brake shoes in here. These still look pretty good. Still got some life left in them, so I'm not going to replace those right now. And it still holds my car when I use it. So we're ready to proceed to bending this shield back. And since I had trouble finding any information on bending the shield, I definitely want to show you this. Now, I found a pair of vice grips that I think will be pretty good for this. You could use whatever you want, channel locks, whatever. But we're not talking rocket science here or precision engineering. I found it was best just to get a hold of this lip and push it back. And if you kind of work it all the way around like a pie pan, bending it out, it's not that hard to bend. And you just want it flat. You want to bend it to about a 90-degree angle so that the edge of it lines up with the new rotor, but is clear of the new rotor. And once we get this thing bent back, we will check those clearances. Make sure your ends aren't sticking in. They have a tendency to want to flare out on the ends, I noticed when I did these. So let's get a hold of that and bend that back. We're going to take some channel locks and just try to bend that little tab back there on the end. You can try to make it really pretty. I did. And once you get that done, you're sure it looks pretty good. You could always fit the rotor up here just to double check it. Got a little more work to do over here. Little tab like to get in the way. That's looking pretty good. A little more down here. And now we're ready. Okay, now we're ready to install our new rotor. First thing you want to do is make sure you clean it with brake clean or with acetone. They have a tendency to get fingerprints on them when you're messing with them. Line up your holes. Push it on. Now you want to check for clearance between that dust shield you just bent and the new rotor. Make sure it's pushed all the way on, and you're ready. Okay, let's install our new caliper. Let's locate our two short screws that came with the kit. I'm pulling some foam out that was put in there by Centric to hold the pads apart. I've already got Loctite on the screw or the bolt, machine bolt. Just going to fit it up on top. It helps if you push your rotor back, make sure it's all the way on. Line it up with the holes in the back where the other rotor came off. Thread this in. It's already looking good. I think I'm going to have to get down on the floor here and get a better angle on this. That'll make it easier. Just screw it in there in a second here. Let me give you a better view of these screws when I get them in. There you go. You can see it's the bottom one there is the one we're putting in. And of course, if you're laying on your garage floor, you'd already know that. You want to finger tight them in and then take your socket and tighten them down. Okay, now we're ready to install the brake line from the old caliper that's still hanging from our coil spring onto the new caliper. First thing you want to do is go around to the driver's side of the car and put a 2x4 or some object between the driver's seat and the brake pedal to depress the brake pedal. This will keep air from going back up into this line when you disconnect it from the old caliper. And it will also keep fluid from draining all over your floor and your hands. Now, the brake lines, they're angled on the end. As you can see, this one I've actually turned it the wrong way, but I did turn it back around after I shot this. This particular kit from Centric, this rebuilt rotor, came with new washers and a new brake line bolt. So you want to use those. Now you want to screw this in. You want to get it tight, but you don't want to crush down your washers. You don't want to flatten those. You just want it tight. It's pretty straightforward. This one happened to have a 14mm head on the bolt. You always check everything. And we're ready to move on. Okay, that looks really good. Double check, make sure everything's tight. Make sure all your bolts are torqued down. Everything looks good. Nothing hanging, nothing where it shouldn't be. Now we're going to take a plastic zip tie, also known as electrician's tie, and we're going to tie this brake line back up out of the way so that it doesn't rub on a wheel and it doesn't rub on a tire and it doesn't rub on the suspension. I really like to use these. I change them every couple of years. Whenever I come in and do a brake bleed or a pad change out, I just change them. I've never had one fail yet. And then once you get it on there, what you want to do is take like a pair of pliers. If you cut it off, it'll leave a sharp edge and it can rip your fingers or your arm if you're up in there reaching around. So I take a pair of pliers and you grab that tail of that right where it comes out of that little clamp on the tie and you just twist it up like a rubber band. Just keep turning it and it'll pop right off. Here we'll show you. Let's take a pair of electrician's pliers, start twisting, and it came right off. And you're done. Now we can do the other side. After getting both sides installed, here's the finished product. And I think they look pretty good. Hope you enjoy your project as much as I enjoyed mine. Thank you for watching my video. Here's a parts list for the parts used to do this project. And here's a slow motion version of it. Thank you again for watching.